The focus today here at Psychology Ninjas comes from criminological psychology and biological explanations of crime and offending. How does this break down? Well, we're talking about theories here once again, and so we need to do the key terms associated with different theories, and you're probably going to give one or more different biological explanations. It's important to note here that where we're talking about traumatic brain injuries or TBIs, this could come up as a separate exam question, as could the amygdala and XYY. So it's important that you have enough detail on these to ensure that you can adequately explain them for the possible and potential marks. It's important with each of these that we're talking about the prevalence or the likelihood of these occurring, and therefore we might have some research in here, especially where you see TBIs and Williams et al, and also XYY and the prevalence. Each time we're talking about this, we want to be making sure that we're making links to criminal behaviour. TBIs are correlated with having a younger first-time offence, a younger age at being offending, a higher rate of offending, and more time spent in prison. Where we're talking about different regions that might be damaged, we want to be talking about what the role of these regions are and also how aggression and specifically offending behaviour is the result of these brain injuries. So where we're talking about orbitofrontal cortex damage, we have a lack of impulse control and therefore we may be more hostile and aggressive. When we're talking about the amygdala, we want to be talking about the fact that higher levels of right hemispheric amygdala activity is going to result in rage or hypersexual behaviour, linking that to violent offending. It's also important here that where we're talking about the amygdala, damage to the amygdala might affect our learning, and therefore prisons may not be as effective because we're not learning in the same manner. When we're talking about XYY, again we want to link into the prevalence of XYY, 1 in 1,000 men, but also the characteristics that this might entail and how this links to offending. So as far as I'm aware, being tall, although a consistent trait for XYY, doesn't have a correlation with offending. But if we have lower levels of IQ, we might be less likely to do well in school, we might not understand the consequences of our behaviour. The same if we're thinking about impulsivity, again we're more reactive, we might be aggressive when other people aren't. But also, we might use some research evidence here where we're saying that those people who have XYY are overrepresented in prison or aggressive populations. Compared to the normal prevalence, where we'd have 10 in 10,000, we can see here from Jacob's research that 15 in 10,000 males were found in a state hospital. So how does this break down in terms of our evaluation? Well, we've still got a theory, and therefore we're using SODA in order to have a range of evaluative points. Here at Psychology Ninjas, we always recommend that you develop and extend those evaluation points either through additional research or a counter-argument. Quite often a counter-argument is useful to develop those logical chains of reasoning and show the examiner that you have balance in your evaluation. So how does this all fit together? Well, this could be up to 16 marks. Evaluate biological explanations of crime. Now, this could also include a personality explanation because that is biological in nature, but we're going to stick with physical differences here for our 16 marks, and there'll be a separate video on Eysenck's theory of personality. We'd first of all explain traumatic brain injuries and the prevalence using Williams' research. We'd then say as our evaluation that there is additional research to support these conclusions, saying that biological explanations are a valid explanation of criminal behaviour. Here we've got Fasel et al.'s research, and we just use findings here because we're using this for evaluation, and also Rain et al. 1997. You could also talk about Rain et al. 1990 or Pardini, it's really up to you and your preference. Therefore, we're saying we've got external validity, external reliability in our consistency of our findings to say that traumatic brain injury is likely to be correlated with aggressive behaviour and criminal behaviour. It's really important here that we don't just focus on aggression, but criminality. We'd then move on to talk about XYY, including behaviour characteristics and its prevalence. We'd say that this explanation actually has a lack of external reliability, with Ree and Burkhoff finding no link between XYY and offending, and therefore social factors, and I would give some here, so maybe poverty or overcrowding or labelling would be a better explanation for criminal offending. Here we can give our counter-argument with negative case analysis, that actually there are more people in the population who have XYY than are in prisons, so it's overrepresentative and there must be another factor that's having an impact. Again, we could give an extraneous variable here. It might be some sort of discussion about the diathesis stress model or interactionism, that we'd need a social cue to activate this genetic marker in order to result in criminal behaviour specifically. We'd then move on and talk about the amygdala, and again talking about the role of the amygdala in the brain and the effect of damage to the amygdala in terms of criminal behaviour. We can use case study research here to support this with Charles Whitman, and you could use that here as well. Overall, we're saying that these explanations are reductionist and we're giving a different theory here. So again, we can talk about a better theory, and we want to be really clear why our different theory that we're offering is actually a better explanation. Eysenck and his theory of personality acknowledges both biological factors in terms of the role of nervous system on personality and socialisation, how people are raised, therefore giving a more holistic explanation. Equally, we can talk about the self-fulfilling prophecy, that if we are diagnosed with a brain injury, that actually the labelling process in relation to that and the regions of the brain may create an opportunity or a label of being criminal. If we take into account these other factors, we've got a more holistic and interactionist approach, acknowledging both nature and nurture. Finally, we talk about the role of the frontal lobe and or the orbitofrontal cortex, again explaining the role these regions of the brain have on behaviour and why criminality is a specific consequence. Here we talk about our application in terms of criminal culpability. If we have damage to the brain and we are unable to control our behaviour, should we have the same sentencing? Particularly, Williams here says an awareness of brain injury should be reviewed in terms of sentencing and maybe in terms of probation and characteristics that might be had in here. Certainly, Rain et al. In 1997 said that these markers should not have an impact on sentencing and should not be used to mitigate the circumstances of criminal behaviour. However, if we do have TBIs, we may be less responsible for their behaviour, and we may need to think about what we're offering within prisons to prevent re-offending. All of this would give credibility to biological explanations of criminal behaviour. We're then going to move through and have a look at some exam questions. Here we've got an 8 marker, and we've got discuss as our command word. This means we need to do 2 skills. We need to explain brain injury, and we also need to apply this to Graham's scenario. There is no need here to include anything in relation to evaluation, so we wouldn't have to do SODA. We do need to focus on brain injury and therefore should be talking about different regions of the brain that might be damaged. Here we've got an additional exam question, and we've upgraded this time to 16 marks. Here we've got the command word to what extent, which requires us to make judgments. Here we're talking about biological explanations, and therefore all the material that we have discussed in our earlier part of the video is now relevant. It's important that we're linking this into Colin's experiences, therefore we need to have all 3 skills shown in this 16 marker. This breaks down into a 6 marks for our AO1, or our knowledge about biological explanations, 4 marks for our varied use of the STEM, in this case Colin's experiences of his high security prison detail, and then we get 6 more marks for our evaluation. Thanks for listening today. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell.